Dr. Alex Carter walked into the massive chamber where the Galactic Council held their meetings. The room was huge and filled with beings from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of crystal, and a few seemed to be floating clouds of gas. Alex had seen them all before during his 3 years of research, but today felt different. Today he would show them something that could change everything. Lisa Morgan walked beside him carrying a small device that contained their life's work. She was nervous but tried not to show it. Behind them came Jake Harrison, a military man who always looked serious, and Elena Rodriguez, the best engineer Earth had ever produced. They were humanity's last hope to get approval for their project. The chamber fell quiet as the human delegation took their place at the speaking platform. Alex looked up at the hundreds of alien faces staring down at them. Most looked bored. Some seemed annoyed that humans were even here. A few were laughing among themselves. Alex pressed a button and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed detailed plans for something that had never been built before. The device they called a quantum matter compiler could take pure energy and turn it into anything they wanted. Food, tools, buildings, even living plants. The science was complex, but the idea was simple. They could create matter from nothing but energy. Counselor Vextar was the first to speak. He was a Zeltharian, which meant he looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and huge black eyes. His voice was cold and dismissive. "So the humans think they can play with quantum forces now," he said. "How amusing. Your species barely understands basic physics, and now you want to manipulate matter at the atomic level." Other council members started whispering and making sounds that Alex knew were their versions of laughter. The crystalline delegate, who looked like a walking diamond, spoke next. "The mathematics alone prove this is impossible," she said. Her voice rang like bells, but her words cut like knives. "Your brains are too simple to handle such complex calculations. Even our most advanced computers struggle with quantum manipulation." Alex tried to explain how they had solved the computation problem by linking human minds with artificial intelligence, but the council members were not listening. They had already made up their minds about humanity. The humans were the youngest species in the galactic community, barely 500 years since first contact. Most of the other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Dr. Ben Thompson, who had come as their quantum physics expert, stepped forward. "If you would just look at our test results," he said, his voice getting louder with frustration. "We have successfully converted energy into stable matter 17 times in our laboratory." "Laboratory tricks," scoffed a delegate who looked like a floating jellyfish. "Creating a few atoms is very different from building anything useful. Besides, your test results could easily be faked." Elena Rodriguez felt her hands clench into fists. These aliens had rejected human proposals before, always with the same excuses. Humans were too young, too primitive, too emotional. They said humans lacked the discipline for real science. But Elena knew the truth. The aliens were afraid that humans might actually succeed. The presentation continued for 2 more hours. Alex showed them energy readings, mathematical proofs, and video recordings of their successful tests. Lisa explained how their quantum compiler could solve the galaxy's resource problems. Jake talked about the military applications for peaceful exploration. Elena described the engineering challenges they had already overcome. Nothing worked. The council members asked no real questions. They made jokes about human ambition and human foolishness. One delegate suggested that humans should focus on more realistic goals like improving their farming methods or learning to build better spaceships. The Arcturian representative, a being that looked like a giant brain with tentacles, was particularly cruel. "Perhaps in another 1,000 years your species will be ready for such advanced concepts," he said. "For now you should leave the serious science to those of us who understand it." Finally, the council's chair being called for a vote. She was an ancient creature from a species so old that no one remembered their original planet. Her skin was like tree bark and her eyes glowed with blue light. "We have heard the human proposal," she announced. "All those in favor of approving their quantum matter compiler project." Not a single hand, tentacle, or appendage was raised. All those against. The chamber erupted with movement as hundreds of delegates voted no. The sound was overwhelming. Alex felt his heart sink as he watched their dreams being crushed by alien arrogance. "The proposal is rejected," the chair being said. "The Galactic Council cannot risk valuable resources on such an unrealistic project. We suggest the humans focus their efforts on more achievable goals." Perhaps they could work on improving their water purification systems or developing better agricultural techniques. As the human delegation gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Alex heard the whispers starting again. The aliens were already moving on to the next presentation, dismissing humanity's greatest achievement as if it were nothing. Some were laughing about human arrogance. Others were making bets about how long it would take for humans to give up on advanced science altogether. Jake Harrison's jaw was tight with anger as they walked toward the exit. He had spent 20 years in Earth's military and had seen humanity overcome impossible odds before. These aliens had no idea what they had just done. They thought they were putting humans in their place, but they had actually made a terrible mistake. Lisa Morgan looked at Alex and gave him a small nod. They had expected this result. In fact, they had planned for it. The quantum matter compiler was already built and waiting in a secret facility on Earth's moon. They had known the Galactic Council would reject their proposal, because the aliens could not imagine that humans might actually be capable of advanced science, Elena. Rodriguez smiled as they entered their transport ship. Let the aliens have their council meetings and their bureaucratic procedures. Humans had always worked best when they were told something was impossible. Every great human achievement had started with someone saying it could not be done. As their ship pulled away from the council station, Alex looked back at the massive structure where hundreds of alien species made decisions about the future of the galaxy. Today they had told humanity to give up on their dreams and accept their limitations. They had dismissed human potential and human determination. They had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had doubted humanity, and now humanity was going to prove them wrong. 6 months after the Galactic Council's rejection, construction began in secret on the far side of Earth's moon. The location was perfect because no alien ships ever came this close to human space without permission. They considered the solar system boring and primitive, which made it the ideal place to hide humanity's greatest project. Alex Carter stood in the main construction bay, watching hundreds of workers building something that should not exist. The facility had been carved deep into the lunar rock to hide their energy signatures from any alien sensors that might be watching. Every day, supply ships arrived carrying materials and equipment that had been gathered from across human space. Lisa Morgan worked at a massive control console that connected her mind directly to the quantum computers. The aliens had been right about one thing. The calculations required for quantum matter compilation were beyond what any normal computer could handle. But they had been wrong about human capabilities. Lisa had discovered that human intuition could guide the quantum processes in ways that pure logic could not. The project had been given the code name Genesis, and it operated under complete secrecy from the galactic community. Only the highest levels of Earth's government knew what was really happening on the moon. As far as official records showed, this was just another mining operation extracting rare metals from lunar soil. Dr. Ben Thompson had assembled the finest scientific minds that humanity could offer. They came from universities and research centers across human space, all united by the alien rejection they had witnessed 6 months ago. Many of them had been personally insulted by alien scientists who claimed human intelligence was too limited for advanced physics. Elena Rodriguez led the engineering teams that turned scientific theory into physical reality. Her workers came from the shipyards that built Earth's space fleet and the construction crews that had built the first human colonies on Mars. They were used to building things that had never been built before, but this project challenged even their considerable skills. Captain Ryan Mitchell oversaw security for the entire operation. His job was to make sure that no alien surveillance detected what they were really doing. Human ships patrolled the outer solar system, ready to intercept any alien vessels that came too close. So far, no alien species had shown any interest in human activities. The work was harder than anyone had expected. Traditional physics said that what they were attempting should be impossible. The quantum matter compiler required perfect coordination between 17 different energy frequencies, each one requiring calculations that allegedly exceeded human brain capacity. But the human team had found ways around every limitation. Chris Peterson, whose engineering ideas had been called too radical by alien scientists, designed the power systems that would drive their quantum compiler. He used principles that alien physics textbooks said were impossible, but which worked perfectly when humans tested them. The aliens were so convinced of their own superiority that they had stopped looking for new solutions to old problems. The breakthrough came when Ben realized they could use quantum entanglement not just for matter conversion, but for the computational load itself. By linking human neural patterns with quantum computers, they achieved processing power that no purely artificial or purely biological system could match. The aliens had never considered this approach because they viewed organic and artificial intelligence as completely separate things. Lisa spent hours each day connected to the quantum systems. Her mind merged with computers in ways that alien scientists claimed were impossible. She could feel the energy patterns flowing through the quantum fields and guide them with an intuition that no artificial intelligence possessed. The process was exhausting but incredibly rewarding. Day by day, the impossible structure grew in the construction bay. What started as a simple ring of compiled matter evolved into something magnificent. The basic structure was a massive wheel that would spin to create artificial gravity. But unlike any space station ever built, this one was being created entirely from converted energy. Elena watched in amazement as her workers used the quantum compiler to create metal alloys that had never existed before. The machine could take pure energy and convert it into any type of matter they needed. Walls, floors, air recycling systems, and even living plants could all be created from nothing but energy and human determination. The first test of a complete section came 3 months into construction. Alex stood with the team as they activated the quantum compiler and began creating a small habitat module. Energy flowed through the quantum fields and slowly began taking shape as solid matter. Within 6 hours, they had a fully functional living space complete with furniture, computers, and a small garden. Jake Harrison watched the process with satisfaction. The military applications were obvious, but what excited him more was the proof that humans could achieve anything they set their minds to. The aliens had spent centuries telling younger species what was possible and what was not. They had created a galaxy where innovation was limited by the prejudices of ancient civilizations. Ben Thompson made daily improvements to the quantum compiler system. Each test revealed new possibilities and new ways to push beyond what alien science claimed were fundamental limits. The machine was becoming more than just a tool for creating matter. It was becoming a symbol of human refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. The construction teams worked in shifts around the clock. They were building more than just a space station. They were building proof that human creativity and determination could overcome any obstacle. Every bolt, every wire, and every computer system was created from pure energy, because humans had decided that impossible was just another word for untried. Chris Peterson often stood in the observation deck watching the growing structure. It was beautiful in a way that went beyond simple engineering. The curves of the habitat sections flowed like art, while the industrial areas showed the raw power of human technology. This was what humanity could create when they stopped listening to others tell them what they could not do. Lisa found that her connection to the quantum systems was becoming stronger each day. She could sense the energy patterns more clearly and guide the matter compilation process with increasing precision. The aliens claimed that biological minds could not handle quantum calculations, but Lisa was proving them wrong with every successful conversion. As the months passed, the Genesis station grew from a simple wheel into a complex city in space. Multiple habitat rings rotated around a central hub, while industrial sections converted energy into everything the growing population would need. Parks and gardens bloomed in areas that had been empty space just hours before. The most amazing part was how easily everything worked. The aliens had convinced themselves that quantum matter compilation was impossibly complex, but the human team found it surprisingly natural once they stopped trying to follow alien theories about how it should work. Human intuition, guided by quantum computing, created results that no alien scientist had ever imagined possible. Alex Carter looked out at their growing creation and smiled. The Galactic Council had rejected their proposal because they believed humans were too primitive to understand advanced science. In 6 months, humanity had proven that the opposite was true. The aliens had become so comfortable with their ancient knowledge that they had forgotten how to discover new possibilities. Soon it would be time to reveal Genesis Station to the galaxy. The structure was nearly complete and ready to house its first permanent residents. When the aliens discovered what humanity had built in secret, their entire understanding of what was possible would be challenged. The species they had dismissed as primitive was about to change the galaxy forever. Captain Zephyron of the Galactic Defense Fleet starship Eternal Vigilance was conducting a routine patrol near the edge of human space when his sensors detected something impossible. His four eyes focused and refocused on the display screen as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The reading showed a massive artificial structure in the outer regions of the Sol system. But that could not be right. "Computer, run a full sensor sweep of Grid 77 Alpha," he ordered, his voice betraying the confusion he felt. The Eternal Vigilance was equipped with the most advanced detection equipment in the galaxy, capable of analyzing objects from millions of kilometers away. "Scanning complete." "Captain," the computer responded in its mechanical voice. "Massive artificial structure detected. Diameter approximately 50 kilometers. Composition unknown. Energy signatures unprecedented. Structure appears to be inhabited." Zephyron felt his mandibles click together in disbelief. 50 kilometers was larger than most moons. The humans barely had the technology to build simple space stations. Yet his sensors were showing something that rivaled the greatest constructions in galactic history. He ordered his navigation officer to set course for the anomaly immediately. As the Eternal Vigilance approached the mysterious structure, Zephyron could see it clearly through the viewing ports. It was a massive wheel spinning slowly in the darkness of space. The surface was covered with what looked like cities, complete with lights that twinkled like stars. Gardens and parks were visible through transparent sections, and ships moved back and forth between docking bays that seemed to appear and disappear as needed. "Impossible," Zephyron whispered to himself. He had served in the Galactic Defense Fleet for 40 years, and had seen the greatest achievements of dozens of civilizations. But this structure defied everything he knew about construction and engineering. The materials alone should have been impossible for humans to obtain, much less shape into something so complex. Within hours of Zephyron's report, emergency sessions were called at the highest levels of galactic government. The discovery reached the Galactic Council before the end of the day. Scientists who had dismissed humanity's quantum matter compiler proposal just months earlier now demanded immediate explanations for how a primitive species had built something that challenged their understanding of physics. Counselor Vexitar was among the first to demand answers. He had been the most vocal critic of human capabilities during their presentation to the Council. Now he faced the impossible reality that the species he had mocked had somehow achieved what his own people considered impossible. His report to the emergency council session was filled with confusion and barely controlled anger. Back on Genesis Station, Alex Carter was in the Central Command Center when the first alien communication arrived. He had been expecting this moment for weeks as their construction neared completion. The station now housed nearly 2 million humans who had volunteered to be the first residents of humanity's impossible city in space. "This is Counselor Vexitar of the Galactic Council," the message began, and Alex could hear the strain in the alien's voice. "We demand immediate access to your construction. You are in violation of 17 different galactic building codes and safety regulations. You must explain how you have built this structure without proper permits and oversight." Alex smiled as he looked out at the thriving city that surrounded him. Children played in parks that had been created from pure energy just hours before. Adults worked in factories and offices that existed because humans had refused to accept alien limitations. Gardens spiraled along the station's inner surface, their plants growing in soil that had been compiled from nothing but human determination and quantum fields. Lisa Morgan stood beside him at the observation window. She had spent the morning using the quantum compiler to create a new residential section for the families that kept arriving from Earth. The process was becoming so natural that she barely needed to think about the complex calculations that alien scientists claimed were impossible for biological minds to handle. "Counselor," Alex replied to the alien message, his voice calm and confident. "You are welcome to visit Genesis Station, but I should warn you that our safety regulations might be different from yours. We built this place using principles that your people claim do not exist." The response from Vexitar came quickly and was filled with anger. "You cannot simply ignore galactic law and build whatever you please. This structure could be dangerous to space traffic. It could destabilize local gravity fields. It could explode and destroy everything in the system." Elena Rodriguez laughed when she heard the alien's concerns. She was standing in the main engineering section watching her teams create new sections of the station in real time. The quantum matter compiler hummed quietly as it converted energy into the materials they needed. The process was so stable and controlled that they had never had a single accident or malfunction. "Tell him we have been operating safely for 6 months," Elena suggested to Alex. "Tell him that our impossible construction has not exploded, destabilized anything, or caused any problems except to alien pride." The first alien delegation arrived 3 days later. 5 ships from different species approached Genesis Station with obvious caution. Their sensors were running constant scans, trying to understand how the massive structure could exist. The energy readings made no sense according to alien physics textbooks. Jake Harrison met the delegation at the docking bay that had been created specifically for their visit. The bay had not existed that morning, but Lisa had used the quantum compiler to build it in less than 4 hours. The aliens emerged from their ships looking confused and nervous. Counselor Vextar was among the visitors, along with representatives from the Crystalline Empire, the Arcturian Science Institute, and 2 other major galactic powers. They looked around the docking bay with expressions that Jake recognized as amazement, mixed with disbelief. "Welcome to Genesis Station," Elena said as she approached the group. "We built it anyway." The aliens followed their human guides through corridors filled with impossible technology. Every surface had been created using the quantum matter compiler. The walls, floors, ceilings, and even the air they breathed had been converted from pure energy using principles that alien science claimed were impossible. Dr. Ben Thompson joined the tour as they reached the main laboratory where the quantum compiler was housed. The machine was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. It combined human intuition with quantum computing in ways that challenged every assumption about how technology should work. "The calculations required for this process," the crystalline delegate said, her voice ringing with confusion. "Our most advanced computers cannot handle such complex variables." "That is because you think like computers," Chris Peterson explained patiently. "We think like humans. We use intuition to guide processes that pure logic cannot understand." The tour continued for hours as the human hosts showed their alien visitors through the impossible city they had built. Restaurants served food that had been created from energy minutes before. Factories produced goods using materials that did not exist in nature. Gardens grew plants that had been compiled from quantum fields rather than planted from seeds. Captain Ryan Mitchell watched the aliens carefully as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Most looked confused and frightened. A few seemed angry that humans had achieved something their own species considered impossible. But all of them were forced to confront the reality that their assumptions about human capabilities had been completely wrong. The most shocking moment came when Lisa demonstrated the quantum compiler in action. Before an audience of alien scientists who had mocked human intelligence, she converted pure energy into a living tree complete with leaves, bark, and active root systems. "Impossible," breathed the Arcturian representative. "Life cannot be created from energy alone." "Says who?" Ben asked with a smile. "You, your physics books, we wrote our own rules." As the day ended and the alien delegation prepared to return to their ships, Vextar approached Alex with something that might have been respect in his voice. "How?" he asked simply. "How did you do what our greatest scientists say cannot be done?" Alex looked out at the city they had built from nothing but human stubbornness and quantum energy. "You told us it was impossible," he said. "We decided to prove you wrong." The galactic scientific community was in complete chaos. Within days of the first alien delegation's return from Genesis Station, reports spread across hundreds of worlds about humanity's impossible achievement. Emergency conferences were called on every major planet as scientists tried to understand how their fundamental beliefs about physics had been proven wrong. Dr. Lisa Morgan found herself giving tours to alien researchers who arrived almost daily. Ships from dozens of species docked at Genesis Station, each one carrying scientists who had spent centuries studying quantum mechanics. Most of them had personally mocked human intelligence just months before, but now they begged for explanations of how the quantum matter compiler actually worked. The crystalline delegate who had dismissed human neural capacity during the original council presentation now stood in the Genesis control room staring at the quantum interface systems. Her diamond-like form shimmered with confusion as she watched human operators seamlessly merge their minds with quantum computers. "The mathematical complexity required for real-time matter compilation," she whispered, her voice like breaking glass. Our most powerful quantum processors cannot handle these calculations even with unlimited time. Yet your organic brains process these variables instantly. Chris Peterson had heard similar comments from dozens of alien visitors. They all made the same mistake of thinking that intelligence was just about raw computational power. You are thinking like a machine, he explained for the 100th time that week. Machines follow rules and calculate probabilities. Humans imagine possibilities and make them real. The real shock came when Ben Thompson agreed to demonstrate the quantum compiler before a gathering of 40 alien scientists from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The demonstration chamber was packed with beings who had studied physics longer than human civilization had existed. They came expecting to expose some kind of trick or fraud that would explain humanity's impossible success. Ben stood before the quantum compiler with complete confidence. The machine hummed quietly as energy fields began forming in the compilation chamber. The alien scientists watched their instruments carefully, trying to understand the process that their own physics said could not work. We will now convert pure energy into living organic matter, Ben announced. Specifically, we will create a mature oak tree complete with active cellular processes and a functional root system. Several alien scientists laughed at what they considered an impossible claim. The Arcturian representative, whose brain-like appearance made him look especially intelligent, spoke up loudly. Living tissue cannot be created from energy alone. The quantum patterns required to encode biological information exceed the processing capacity of any known technology. Ben smiled and placed his hands on the quantum interface. His mind linked with the compilation systems as energy began flowing through carefully controlled quantum fields. The alien scientists watched in stunned silence as matter began forming in the compilation chamber. First came the root system, then the trunk, and finally branches covered with green leaves. Within 30 minutes, a fully grown oak tree stood in the chamber. The alien scientists ran every test they could think of. The tree was completely real and alive. Its cells were dividing normally. Its roots were seeking nutrients. Its leaves were conducting photosynthesis. According to everything they knew about science, what they were seeing was impossible. This cannot be happening, the Arcturian muttered as he reviewed his scanner readings for the 10th time. Our quantum field equations prove that biological compilation is impossible. The information density required exceeds the theoretical limits of quantum storage. Your equations are wrong, Ben said simply. You calculated theoretical limits based on artificial processing. You never considered what happens when organic intuition guides quantum manipulation. The alien scientists erupted into arguments among themselves. Some claimed the humans must have stolen the technology from some unknown advanced civilization. Others insisted it was an elaborate illusion created by hidden machinery. A few began frantically trying to rewrite their fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics on the spot. Elena Rodriguez watched the chaos with satisfaction. For months she had listened to alien experts explain why human engineering was primitive and limited. Now those same experts were demanding copies of her blueprints and begging for access to human research data. Your construction techniques violate basic principles of structural engineering, complained a Zeltharian architect, whose own species had built cities for thousands of years. The load distribution patterns in your habitat rings should cause catastrophic failure within days. Elena led him to an observation window, where they could see one of the residential sections. Families were walking through parks where children played on equipment that had been compiled just hours before. The artificial gravity was perfect. The structural integrity was absolute. Everything worked exactly as designed. Your principles assume that matter must be assembled from existing materials, Elena explained. We compile our structures at the molecular level with perfect atomic alignment. Every joint is stronger than natural crystal. Every surface is optimized for its specific function. Captain Ryan Mitchell had to maintain order as more alien delegations arrived each day. The docking bays were constantly busy with ships carrying scientists, government officials, and military observers. Most came expecting to find some explanation for humanity's achievement that would preserve their sense of galactic superiority. Instead, they found a thriving city that challenged everything they believed about what was possible. The humans had not just built a space station, they had created a new way of thinking about technology and engineering. Every system on Genesis Station operated on principles. that alien textbooks said were impossible. The most difficult moment came when Counselor Vextar demanded that humanity share their quantum compilation technology with all galactic civilizations. He arrived with a fleet of warships and an official order from the Galactic Council requiring immediate technology transfer. Jake Harrison met the counselor in the main conference room where the original human delegation had been rejected months before, but this time the meeting was taking place on Genesis Station, surrounded by proof of human capabilities that no alien could deny. You have a responsibility to share this technology with the galactic community, Vextar declared, his mandibles clicking with authority. Advanced technologies belong to all civilized species, not just the ones who discover them. Jake's response was calm but firm. You had your chance to support our research. You called us primitive. You mocked our intelligence. You said our brains were too simple for advanced science. Now you want what we built without your help. Alex Carter joined the conversation as Vextar's anger became obvious. The counselor had spent his entire career believing that younger species needed guidance from their betters. The idea that humans had surpassed galactic science was devastating to his worldview. We are willing to share our knowledge, Alex said carefully, but only with civilizations that approach us with respect and humility. We will not give our technology to beings who still believe they are superior to us. Lisa Morgan added her own conditions. Any species that wants to learn quantum compilation must first admit that their previous assumptions about human capabilities were wrong. They must acknowledge that we achieved something they considered impossible. The alien scientists struggled with this requirement. Admitting error was difficult for species that had considered themselves the galaxy's intellectual leaders for thousands of years. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans had built something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic science. Ben Thompson watched as pride battled with curiosity in the alien delegates. Some were too arrogant to admit they had been wrong about human potential. Others were eager to learn new possibilities regardless of the damage to their egos. The choice is yours, Ben told the assembled aliens. You can continue believing that we are primitive while we continue proving you wrong. Or you can accept that intelligence takes many forms and that imagination is more powerful than calculation. The meeting ended without resolution, but the message was clear. Humanity had proven that the galaxy's assumptions about primitive species were completely wrong. The beings who had been dismissed as intellectually inferior had created something that their supposed superiors could not understand or duplicate. As alien ships continued arriving at Genesis Station, each one carrying beings desperate to understand humanity's impossible achievement, one thing became certain: the galaxy would never again dismiss human potential. The species that had been too stubborn to accept limitations had changed the rules of what was possible forever. 1 year after Genesis Station's reveal to the galaxy, everything had changed. The rigid hierarchies that had governed galactic civilization for thousands of years were crumbling as species, after species realized that their assumptions about intelligence and capability had been completely wrong. The human approach to science, which combined intuition with computation and refused to accept impossible as a final answer, had sparked a renaissance that touched every corner of known space. Dr. Alex Carter now headed the Genesis Institute, a research facility that welcomed scientists from across the galaxy. But admission required something that many alien species found more difficult than any mathematical equation: intellectual humility. Applicants had to acknowledge that their previous beliefs about human limitations had been wrong and commit to approaching problems with open minds rather than predetermined conclusions. The first alien scientist to truly embrace the new paradigm was Kithara, a young Zeltharian researcher who had watched her species' greatest minds fail to understand quantum compilation. She arrived at Genesis Station with none of the arrogance that characterized older alien scientists. Instead, she came with genuine curiosity and a willingness to learn from beings her elders had dismissed as primitive. Kithara worked alongside Elena Rodriguez to design the second Genesis-class station. This new construction would incorporate Zeltharian bioenhancement techniques with human quantum compilation, creating hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. The project became a symbol of what was possible when different forms of intelligence worked together, instead of competing for dominance. I understand now, Kithara explained to a gathering of interspecies scientists who had come to observe their collaboration. We became so focused on what could not be done that we forgot to imagine what might be possible. Humans taught us that limitations exist primarily in our minds, not in the universe itself. Lisa Morgan had established the Human-Alien Collaborative Initiative, where mixed teams tackled problems that had been considered unsolvable for centuries. Their first major success was a faster-than-light communication system that combined human neural quantum interfaces with crystalline, dimensional folding techniques and Arcturian probability mathematics. The breakthrough came when Lisa realized that the three technologies were not competing approaches but complementary aspects of a larger solution. Human intuition could guide the quantum fields, crystalline knowledge could fold space-time, and Arcturian calculations could ensure message accuracy across vast distances. Working together, they achieved something that none of them could have created alone. Ben Thompson often stood in the Genesis Institute's main laboratory watching mixed teams of humans and aliens working side by side. The sight still amazed him after months of collaboration. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now sharing their deepest scientific secrets and building impossible technologies together. The galaxy's attitude toward humanity had shifted, completely from dismissive mockery to respectful partnership. Trade agreements were signed daily, as alien civilizations offered their most advanced technologies in exchange for access to human quantum compilation techniques. Research partnerships flourished as species that had been rivals for millennia found common ground in their shared amazement at human achievements. Jake Harrison watched the transformation from his office aboard Genesis Station. As head of interspecies security, he coordinated protection for the hundreds of collaborative projects that were now underway. The galaxy was changing so rapidly that old political boundaries meant less each day. Species were forming new alliances based on scientific compatibility, rather than ancient territorial claims. The most dramatic change came when the Galactic Council officially recognized the human doctrine, a new principle that stated any limitation not based on fundamental universal constants was merely a failure of imagination. The doctrine overturned thousands of years of scientific orthodoxy and opened possibilities that no one had previously considered. Chris Peterson had become the leading expert on applied imagination, a field that had not existed before humans proved that creative thinking could reshape reality. His lectures at the Genesis Institute attracted audiences from across the galaxy as beings tried to understand how humans had learned to think beyond traditional limitations. The secret is not intelligence, Chris explained to a packed auditorium of alien scientists. The secret is refusing to accept that smart people before you have already discovered everything worth knowing. Every impossible thing becomes possible the moment someone decides to try it anyway. Elena Rodriguez led construction teams that were building Genesis-class stations throughout the galaxy. Each new station incorporated improvements suggested by different alien species, creating hybrid technologies that pushed the boundaries of what anyone had thought possible. The stations became centers of learning where old assumptions were constantly challenged and new possibilities were constantly discovered. The 12 Genesis-class stations that now existed throughout galactic space had become more than just habitats or research facilities. They were symbols of what could be achieved when beings stopped telling each other what was impossible and started working together to discover what might be possible. Dr. Alex Carter received messages daily from young beings across the galaxy who had been inspired by humanity's example. They no longer accepted impossible as an answer to their dreams. Instead, they asked different questions. Not whether something could be done, but how it might be accomplished if they approached it from a completely new direction. The most remarkable transformation was in the alien scientists who had initially mocked human capabilities. Many of them had become humanity's strongest advocates, speaking throughout the galaxy about the importance of intellectual humility and the dangers of assumptions about primitive species. Counselor Vextar himself had become one of the most vocal supporters of interspecies collaboration. The being who had dismissed human intelligence as too limited for serious science now worked directly with human researchers on projects that would have been inconceivable just 2 years. Earlier, I was wrong, Vextar admitted during a public ceremony honoring human achievements. We were all wrong. We confused age with wisdom and assumed that because we had been studying science longer, we must understand it better. Humans taught us that fresh Perspectives often see solutions that experienced minds have overlooked. Lisa Morgan found that her work with the quantum compilation systems had evolved far beyond simple matter conversion. She was now exploring possibilities that went beyond anything in alien scientific literature. The quantum fields responded to human imagination in ways that surprised even her, creating results that challenged the fundamental assumptions about what technology could accomplish. Ben Thompson's research had opened entirely new fields of study as alien scientists rushed to understand how human neural patterns could guide quantum processes that their computers could not handle. Universities across the galaxy were establishing new departments of bioquantum interface studies, trying to duplicate the natural abilities that humans seem to possess. The galaxy was no longer the rigid hierarchy it had been for thousands of years. Species that had been considered primitive were now revealing capabilities that their supposed superiors had never imagined. The assumptions that had governed galactic civilization were being replaced by curiosity and collaboration as Alex Carter stood on the observation deck of Genesis station watching ships from dozens of species dock at their impossible creation. He reflected on how much had changed since that day in the Galactic Council chamber. The beings who had rejected humanity's proposal were now eager partners in projects that pushed the boundaries of known science. 5 years after the Council's rejection, there were Genesis-class stations throughout the galaxy, each one a testament to the power of human-led collaborative science. The rigid boundaries between species had given way to communities united by shared curiosity and mutual respect. Young beings across the galaxy were learning to question assumptions and imagine new possibilities. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned to dream again. The ancient civilizations that had grown comfortable with their established knowledge were rediscovering the excitement of genuine discovery. They had been reminded that the universe held infinite possibilities for those brave enough to explore them. The world had doubted humanity, dismissing them as too primitive for serious science. But humans had built the impossible anyway, and in doing so they had taught the entire galaxy that determination and imagination could reshape reality itself. The species that had been too stubborn to know when they were beaten had changed the universe forever.